In 2015, this happened to a good friend of mine, which we'll call him Alex. Now, when he was about maybe 16 or 17 years old, Alex was taking his new girlfriend named Rebecca out to a date. But of course, it was on Valentine's Day, and it was still winter outside, as it was happened to be one of the coldest days of all. Now, on Valentine's Day, Alex decided to sit there and take Rebecca for a nice long walk in the forest. Of course, they had to go there around the time when before it got dark, as it was still getting dark out at certain times. Most couples on Valentine's Day will go out to eat, go party at a bar, and etc. But with Alex and even Rebecca, that were even 17, they both were taking their time. As they were heading down what seemed to be a forest, as they were walking through the forest, they were enjoying the view and the beauty of nature. While walking down, they all of a sudden saw what seemed to be a light in the distance. They looked up because they thought it might have been something else, but they couldn't really see on who or what it was. They were quite confused at what this light really was, but they decided to sit there and go towards the light. As they didn't really know who or what was in the forest there, but as they were getting closer, all of a sudden the light shut off, and Alec and Rebecca looked at each other. Maybe it was something they didn't really need to see. But of course, then they all of a sudden heard what seemed to be a loud scream coming from the distance. Their blood ran cold, and they realized that whoever was there was probably not friendly, so Alex and Rebecca ran all the way back to Rebecca's house, not even looking back until they were out of the forest. They had no idea who or what was in that forest with them, but what they do know is that they weren't alone on Valentine's Day. And they didn't even bother to go in that forest alone in the dark again. But even if they went in there in the night, they were with somebody. But they never told anybody about this encounter, as they forgot about it shortly after this event happened. Maybe around sometime, maybe a few years ago, probably maybe in 2015 or 16, this happened to a good friend of mine, which we'll call her Lauren. Now, Lauren was about maybe 22 years old, and this happened to her on Valentine's Day. On Valentine's Day, she was going to the bar with her boyfriend named Jake, and of course, Jake and Lauren had been dating for at least a few months now, and Jake decided to take her to a bar. Now, Lauren's never been to the bar before, but since it was Valentine's Day, Jake wanted to make it extra special for her. And in other words, he had taken her to lots of places like restaurants and the mall and etc. Most couples on Valentine's Day would do something like this, and some would go to the movies, some would go out to eat, and etc. Now, since Jake wanted to make it extra special for Lauren, he decided to go pick her up in his Tesla. As he went to go pick her up, they drove over to the bar that was not far from my hometown. Now, when Lauren and Jake got into the bar was already crowded with people, so they both decided to stay together. And as they traveled in the bar, they ordered a few drinks, and they were having a pretty good time. So Lauren ended up explaining about certain stuff to Jake, and saying about what their plans were for the next day or so. As they were just chatting, they all of a sudden heard a loud gunshot, followed by people screaming. Lauren and Jacob looked over to see that the gunshot had came from the door, and they looked to see a man, and he had a gun. He began to shoot at almost everything or at everyone. So Lauren and Jacob had to run over and get away from the bar. As they escaped from the bar, they went in their car and dialed 911. And as soon as they were doing that, the man all of a sudden comes near to their van and starts pounding on the door even though the door was locked, demanding to be let in. Lauren was scared, and same with everyone else. This one is going to be something that no one would ever think or have to go through. Now, Lauren was scared, but of course the police came and they took the man away. They asked Lauren and Jake some questions like, "Are you okay?" and "Do they know this guy?" and etc. But they found out some disturbing news when they put the guy in the back of the police van. That guy had been wanted for assault and he had a history of breaking into people's houses and bars and shooting at least 2 or 3 men and women. Now, at this time of the story, this man had been wanted for lots of areas, but since then, what about this place that really gave Lauren and even Jake chills is this moment. They never went to the bar again, and they have no idea as what could have happened if the police had shown up any later. On Valentine's Day back in 2016, this happened to me on Valentine's Day. So, make a long story short, my granddad from my mom's side sadly passed away the day before Valentine's Day. And my mom asked me on that day that if I wanted to take this weekend off from riding, but I needed to clear my head off. Even though I was still grieving from my grandfather's death, I was still needing to some time for some air. Now, I went on a horseback riding lesson with my friend Vanessa, and we were doing our lesson, and then our coach said to us at the end of the lesson to take them for a hack. None of our horses were being used again that day, so it was a really sweet relief as I needed some time to clear my mind. The other two girls went ahead while Vanessa and I stayed back to go get our sweaters. Apparently, we were really hot while riding earlier, so we had to take off our jackets, but we took them with us so we could wear them while we were riding in the back of the field. There was a trail that went in the forest, so we decided to go there, thinking that two other riders had went there. Now, we were traveling in the forest on horseback, and we looked around, but as we were going through though, Vanessa could see that there was a structure in the distance. I couldn't see what it was, as I wasn't sure what Vanessa was pointed at, but upon getting closer, we realized that it was an old treehouse. Now, this treehouse looked like that it might have been really old, as it looked like it had been used a long time ago, and it might have been a nice one. So we headed over in that direction, not even thinking about what else could happen. As we were traveling through the forest, we ended up getting closer, and of course I found that seemed to be a plastic bag of something. We didn't really want to know what was in the plastic bag, assuming that it might have been garbage or something, as some people in this area, a lot of people like to dump their trash out in the forest and the wildlife. It's pretty dumb that people just sit there and do that. But of course, I'm just gonna sit here right now, is that it was something. So, with that being the case, we ended up going down for the trail. We got over to the treehouse. I looked up to see that there was some wood and some graffiti on it. And I looked to see the steps that were wood, and even though they were slightly rotted, I climbed up the steps. I tied my horse over to what seemed to be a branch not far, so then that way my horse wouldn't get away while I was climbing up the steps. As I got up top of the steps, I looked around the treehouse, but I could found were beer bottles, and there was even graffiti, and there was some even litter all over the place. On a table not far from where I was looking at, there seemed to be a wallet filled with money. I counted the bills in there. It looked like there were about $800 in there. I didn't know who owned it, so I told Vanessa about what I found. She said to keep it in case if we could find the owner. I looked to see if there was any ID or something that could tell us who the wallet belonged to, but unfortunately we didn't find anything. So with that being said, I am going to sit there and say that this was actually something I had no idea what to do. Now, I put my wallet in my pocket, and I end up climbing down the steps. But then all of a sudden I heard some trees and branches snapping, followed by someone, walking around. Now, we looked over, and we ended up seeing that there was some figure or something. Of course, the figure was too far away for us to see who it was, so I got back on my horse, and just as we did that, the guy ended up running off into the distance of the woods. We weren't sure what direction he was going, probably somewhere where he can get his plans to strike us. Me and Vanessa stuffed the wallet and the money in our pockets, and we ended up running all with our horses. We ended up galloping all the way back to the barn. When we got there, we ended up going back to the barn, and of course our coach asked us where we have been and said that we were, taking a while to get there because there was so much snow. Not to mention that we got a lot of snow the night before, so that wasn't surprising. But we never told anybody about our encounter with this figure or even the money, as we really don't know what to expect. With that being the case, me and Vanessa never told anyone about this story, afraid that we're gonna get in trouble. But since then, I still wonder what this figure was doing. I don't know if this figure was playing to lure us into a trap or not, but I could tell this figure's intentions were not good.